It is 4:55, and detect a quorum with myself present, Councilmember Allen present, Councilmember Benedict present, Councilmember Cap present, Councilmember Cortez present, Councilmember Gadd present, Councilmember Horton present, Councilmember Coopin, I thought I saw Councilmember Coopin, Councilmember Parker present, Councilmember Rutherford present, Councilmember Vo present. Thank you all for being here. We do have a consent agenda, and I'll read out the names of the numbers rather for the consent agenda, and if anyone needs to pull something off, please let me know before I go through the captions. On consent, we have RS 2024-589, 591, 592, 593, 5602 rather. Bills on second reading, 443, 444, 446, 447, 435, not 435, 335, 346, I'm on third reading, 372, 400, 401, 402, 403, 404, 406, 407, 408, 409, 410, 412, 413, 414, 415, 416, 417, 420, 421, 422, 424, and 425. Does anything need to be pulled off of consent? All right, with no indication from anyone, we will go through the captions. Starting with RS 2024-589, Porterfield Gamble Allen authorizes the Metropolitan Mayor to submit a 2024-25 annual update to the 2023-2028 Consolidated Plan for Housing and Community Development to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. RS 2024-591, Porterfield Gamble Welch and Allen authorizes grants not exceeding $760,554 from the Barnes Fund for Affordable Housing to Housing Fund for express purpose of creating affordable or workforce housing utilizing American Rescue Plan Act funds. RS 2024-592, Porterfield Gamble Welch and Allen authorizes grants not exceeding $7 million from the Barnes Fund for Affordable Housing to William Franklin Buchanan Community Development Corporation for the express purpose of creating affordable or workforce housing utilizing American Rescue Plan Act funds. RS 2024-593, Porterfield Gamble Welch Allen approves the First Amendment to 2 grant contracts for constructing affordable housing approved by RS 2022-1857 between the Metropolitan Government acting by and through the Metropolitan House Trust Fund Commission and Affordable Housing Resources, Inc. and Project Return. RS 2024-594, Porterfield Gamble Welch Allen approves the Second Amendment to a grant contract for constructing affordable housing approved by RS 2022-1443 between the Metropolitan Government acting by and through the Metropolitan Housing Trust Fund Commission and Urban Housing Solutions, Inc. RS 2024-602, Gamble Parker amends ordinance number BL 2023-16 to authorize the Metropolitan Government to accept additional public sanitary sewer mains, sanitary sewer manholes, and easement for two properties located at West Division Street in Wilson County, also known as Cane Break Subdivision Phase 1B. Bills on second reading, BL 2024-443, Toombs, Porterfield, Styles, and others, approves a Greenway Conservation easement between the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation and the Balls family for greenway improvements at 4800 Buena Vista Pike, 4804 Buena Vista Pike, and 4808 Buena Vista Pike. BL 2024-444, Toombs, Porterfield, Styles, and others, approves a Greenway Conservation easement between the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation and Rock Nashville Properties, LLC, for Greenway improvements at 1300 Whites Creek Pike. BL 2024-446, Cap Gamble Parker, authorizes the Metropolitan Government to abandon easement rights for property located at 210 South 10th Street, formerly a portion of alley number 286. BL 2024-447, Gamble Parker, authorizes the Metropolitan Government to accept new sanitary sewer mains, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for property located at Fly Road in Williamson County, also known as Storyville Section. BL 2024-466, Styles. No, that's not on consent. Bills on third reading, substitute BL 2024, that's not on consent. BL 2024-335, Toombs, Evans, Siegel. Amend section 1740, 740 and 1740, 770 of the Metropolitan Code zoning relating to reorganize and amend the requirements for a waiver of fees associated with the application to the Board of Zoning Appeals made by a member. That is not on consent. Let me go down. On consent, on third reading, BL 2024-372, Kimbrough, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by changing from RS10 to R10 zoning for property located at 3411 Hydes Ferry Road, approximately 235 feet southwest of Ashton Avenue and Hydes Ferry Road intersection. BL 2024-400, Toombs, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws and zoning ordinance, the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by changing from RM20A to SP zoning for properties located at 15A BC Fern Avenue, approximately 150 feet west of Elmhurst Avenue. BL 2024-401, Toombs, authorizes building material restrictions and requirement for BL 2024-400, a specific plan zoning district on properties located at 15 ABC Fern Avenue. BL 2024-402, Welch, amends Title 17 of Metropolitan Code of Laws and zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by changing from RS5 to RM20A and S zoning for properties located at 338 Whitsitt Road and Whitsitt Road, approximately 190 feet east of Nolensville Pike. BL 2024-403, Foe and Allen, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by applying a historic landmark overlay district to property located at 1109 First Avenue South, approximately 150 feet south of Mildred Chute Avenue. BL 2024-404, Sepulveda and Allen, amends Title 17 of Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of Metropolitan Government by changing from OR 20 to MULA zoning for property located at 5100 Linbar Drive, approximately 1,250 feet east of Wallace Road. BL 2024-406, Welch, amends Title 17 of Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of Metropolitan Government by changing from RS5 to R6A zoning for property located at 299 and 301 Oriole Avenue. Substitute BL 2024-407 by Vo, amends Title 17 of Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by changing from R6 to OR 20 ANS zoning for property located at 749 Linwood Avenue. BL 2024-408, Spain, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by changing from R80 to SP zoning for property located at 7848 McQuarrie Lane, approximately 410 feet south of Highway 70, to permit 90 single-family residential lots. BL 2024-409, Spain, Associated Bill, authorizes building material restrictions and requirements for BL 2024-408, a specific plan zoning district for property located at 7848 Macquarie Lane. BL 2024-410, Toombs, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by changing from R10 to RM15A and S zoning for property located at 2119 Courtney Avenue at the northwest corner of Courtney Avenue. BL 2024 412 by Vo, amends Title 17 of Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by changing from R6 to RM20A zoning for property located at 758 Linwood Avenue. BL 2024-413, Prep T, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws and zoning ordinance of Metropolitan Government by changing from R40 to R30 zoning for property located at 3603 Belmont Boulevard, approximately 300 feet south of Gray Bar Lane. BL 2024-414, Toombs, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws and zoning ordinance of Metropolitan Government by changing from R8 to IWD zoning for property located at 421 Woodfolk Avenue, approximately 525 feet west of Brick Church Pike. BL 2024-415 by Welch, amends Title 17 of Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by changing from RS5 to R6A zoning for property located at 2320 Foster Avenue, approximately 50 feet north of Peachtree Street. BL 2024-416 Ewing, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws and zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by amending a portion of a planned unit development overlay district to permit an increase in the allowable square footage on property located at 7075 Old Harding Pike, approximately 597 feet west of Old Hickory Boulevard. Bill 2024-417, as amended, amends by Styles, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of metropolitan government by changing a portion of a planned unit development for property located at 5255 Hickory Hollow Parkway, approximately 422 feet west of Bell Road and Hickory Hollow Parkway. Bill 2024-420 by Spain amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government by amending a portion of a specific plan for properties located at 441 Union Bridge Road and Union Bridge Road unnumbered at the southeast corner of Union Bridge Road and Pasquo Road, Zone SP, to permit a mixed-use development. BL 2024-421, Spain, authorizes building material restrictions and requirements for BL 2024-420, a proposed specific plan zoning district on properties located at 441 Union Bridge Road and Union Bridge Road unnumbered. BL 2024-422, Sepulveda, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws and Zoning Ordinance of Metropolitan Government by changing from R8 to RM20A zoning for property located at 529 Paragon Mills Road. BL 2024-424, Parker, amends Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of Metropolitan Government by changing from R6 to SP zoning for property located at 928 Delmas Drive, approximately 1,180 feet west of Gallatin Pike, to permit 2 multifamily residential units. And BL 2024-425 by Parker, associated bill, authorizes building material restrictions and requirements for BL 2024-424, a specific plan zoning district on properties located at 928 Delmas Drive, approximately 1,180 feet west of Gallatin Pike. May I have a motion on the consent agenda? Moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries. All right, we will go back to the beginning of the agenda, starting with number 5 on your agenda, RS 2024-594 by Porterfield, Gamble, Welch, and Allen, approves the Second Amendment to a grant contract for constructing affordable housing approved by RS 2022-1443 between the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through Metropolitan Housing Trust Fund Commission, and the Urban Housing Solutions. There is a proposed amendment on this bill. To remove the bill first. Okay, may I have a motion on the bill? Moved and properly seconded. And would anyone like to move the proposed amendment for Councilmember Porterfield? Councilmember Benedict, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking for an explanation. So I'll second if Councilmember Allen moved. Second, I was wondering if we can get an explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. I've been moved and properly seconded the amendment, and maybe have an explanation of the amendment.
The original legislation had 2 agreements with the Urban Housing Solutions, and the amendment did not reference a specific agreement with Urban Housing Solutions. So this, the amendment to the legislation that amends the grant contract just makes that clear.
Okay, looks like there's a housekeeping amendment. Are there any questions or discussion on the amendment? All those in the favor of the amendment say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now we're on the bill as amended. May I have we've already moved the bill. Thank you. Any discussion, or may I have a second? Thank you. Any discussion on the bill as amended? With no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on to number 11. Did we do that? Did we do 466? I can't remember if I put that on consent. Okay. Number 11 on your agenda, BL 2024-466 by Styles and Sepulveda. That's right. It approves 3 option agreements authorizing the purchase of properties for a new elementary school in Antioch, Tennessee. May I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded, ready for discussion, and I believe there's someone here from Metro Schools that can talk about the, okay. Okay, okay, okay. Actually, there is a letter from Councilmember Stiles to defer this bill until the first meeting in August. And so may I have a motion on, or have a deferral motion from someone on the committee? Thank you. It is moved by Councilmember Gad and seconded by Councilmember Benedict. All those in favor of deferring this bill until August 1st? Oh, we have some discussion. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we just check with schools and see if that cuts off any options by adding that time?
Good question. Thank you. All right. If the person who wants to come up, if you introduce yourself and answer the question.
Thank you, Chairman. David Braun, Metro Nashville Public Schools. No, that does not affect the options. We're still, if we pass it on third consideration on the 20th, we'll still be within the window on the options.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, and I'll correct this. This is being deferred into the first meeting in August, not August 1st. It's actually August 6th. So with no further discussion, we'll take a vote on the deferment. All those in favor of deferment, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, moving on to number 12 on our agenda, Substitute Bill 2024-187 by Horton, Evans Siegel, Vo, and others. Amends Section 1716030 of the Metropolitan Code zoning regulations to amend the conditions for adaptive residential developments located in non-residential zoning districts where residential uses are permitted with conditions. May I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. And I know we have discussion. The sponsor is here, Councilmember Horton. Let me get your, why am I? There you go.
Thank you, Chair. We discussed this one briefly in council earlier this month, but to recap very briefly, what this bill does is expand housing in commercial and office and shopping districts. Currently, it's already permissible to build housing here subject to certain conditions, and among others, including that the property be located in the USD, and most significantly and detrimentally, that it be located on an arterial or collector street. What this bill does is amend those conditions, including getting rid of the condition that it be located on an arterial or collector street, which is, that condition's a problem, not just because it significantly limits where we can build housing, but it banishes the housing that it does permit to the busiest, the most polluted, and most dangerous parts of the city. So amending these conditions are beneficial for a number of reasons, three main ones. First, it expands the number of properties that we're able to build housing in. This increases the supply of housing and helps ease pressure on housing markets in the midst of an affordability crisis for our city. Second, it focuses that housing construction where it makes the most sense in close proximity to commercial amenities. And this is good for two reasons. First, it helps us push back against more car traffic congestion by putting residents right to where the amenities they want to go to are. And second, it provides an incentive for the additional commercial amenities that many of our communities, especially in the GSD, are sorely lacking. So it provides the rooftops necessary to support those. Third and finally, this does not affect residential zoning districts. So it manages to accomplish these things without disrupting established residential neighborhoods. So that's the main bill. I know we have a number of substitutes and amendments to go through.
Thank you. Thank you for that great summary of the bill. Should we take the amendments first, Director Darby? Or? Yeah, we moved and seconded and we're on discussion. Okay. Is there any further discussion before we could take the First Amendment? All right, Councilmember Horton, if you'd like to move, well, you can't move the amendment. No, you are on the committee. Thank you. You may move your amendment.
Thank you. I would like to move the first substitute one prepared by, sorry. Would you like to hear from the planning department? Sorry, were you grabbing the mic, Lisa? Oh, okay. The first substitute, which number I have lost. It was prepared by planning. It's a housekeeping substitute.
Okay.
It clarifies the application of the bill to planned unit developments.
Okay. Moved and properly seconded, and he has explained the amendment. Any discussion on Amendment 1? And if the planning table would like to add to that, let me put your mic on. There you go.
Sure. So this amendment was in response to a recommendation from staff to the Planning Commission that Planning Commission agreed with. And so it just provides some clarification when a property might be zoned CS but would be within a planned unit development, so that we make sure that the uses are controlled by the planned unit development, not necessarily in this case, the underlying zoning.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the Amendment 1? With no further discussion, we're ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Councilmember Horton, if you'd like to move your Amendment 2.
Do I need to move the amendment? Can I withdraw it?
Yes.
Withdraw.
Thank you. All right, moving on. We are on the proposed Amendment 3, which is introduced by myself, the Chair. And first, I want to move the amendment. May I have a second? Thank you. The amendment has been moved and properly is seconded. This amendment adds some conditions to the adaptive residential. While I agree with the sponsor that this is a clever way to increase housing in our area, there are some concerns about how the impact in the general service district and some suburban communities. I've heard concerns from folks in my community as well as other suburban communities in the southern part of the county. And so this amendment proposes that while we are extending the adaptive residential use in the general service district, that we restrict the height of developments in the suburban areas. You don't have a lot of buildings that are over, really over 4 feet, over 4 stories or 60 feet. And so we're wanting to add housing by also preserving character of the community, or I want to say, not so preserving, but also enhancing the character of the community. And with that, added a 4-story, 60 feet height restriction on any developments. The issue in the suburban community, there's not so many commercial buildings that are being repurposed like you find in the urban community. In suburban and the GSD, you have more so land, vacant land that is commercial. So this brings an opportunity to bring in more housing. Also, there's a condition that would ask that if the adaptive residential zoning is used, that, or tool rather, is used, that if 50 or more units are built on that commercial property, then at least a minimum of 10% of the floor ratio, if there is a building, or 10% of the total size of the property be designated for a commercial use that would include a grocery store, a restaurant, a daycare, or office use. And so those are specified in the amendment, because those are uses that I've heard from the community and have yearned for many years, having lived in the community over 30 years, that is a need in that community and a want in that community. So while we're adding more rooftops to help attract that type of commercial, we want to make sure that we also don't exclude opportunities for that commercial. So that is the purpose of the amendment, and I will ask the planning table to add any context to that as well.
So the planning department, anytime there are amendments to bills, our review of them, amendments to bills that the planning commission has made a recommendation of them, our review of them is to determine if they are consistent with or in conflict with the planning commission recommendation. Sometimes if something is in conflict with the planning commission recommendation, then it can change our recommendation from approval to a disapproval. And so we reviewed all of the amendments and looked at this one in both sections that had been added. Section 1, which limits the height, that's more restrictive than what the Planning Commission recommended approval of, because the Planning Commission recommendation did not limit height beyond what the language of the zoning code said. And because of that, that would not be in conflict with the Planning Commission recommendation. And then on the second one, which adds the requirement for a set aside for projects of 50 units or more, that is consistent with the Planning Commission recommendation, which discussed encouraging mixed use. And so for that, larger projects would have a set aside for commercial space. And so that would be consistent with the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Thank you. Questions, Councilmember Gad? As soon as I find your, there you are.
Thank you so much, Chair Gamble. And thank you so much to the sponsor bringing this bill. I know it's something that I know neighborhoods in my district and I think beyond are always concerned about the impact on neighborhoods. So for me, I see this as a way of getting additional residential without that additional impact on the neighborhoods and that encroachment there. So I really appreciate that. I do have a question on the two different parts, and I respect your leadership and also your concern for the areas that you represent and others you've shared. But I do have just some concerns about the amendment. And on the first part, and I'm being dangerous right now where I don't have the amendment directly in front of me, even though I just read it a few moments ago. So any of you can correct me if I get this reference incorrect. Look at that. What am I talking about? Look, thank you, Council Member Allen. You're amazing. So the first part on the height reduction, and I think this is for you, Chair, or the planning, however you'd like to defer or to have the question answered. Can that be for structure height? Can that be handled through overlays?
We'll go to the planning table.
And I guess I'm thinking,
Generally,
okay,
no.
I'm thinking,
No, there's not sort of an existing overlay that would just control height in commercial districts.
but if we're looking at residential, I mean, I've got several neighborhoods and along a corridor that have explored.
So contextual overlays do not apply to commercial zoning districts. Those are only
But if we're
for R or RS.
Right.
So they're limited to like 1 and 2 family.
But I'm sorry, I was looking at Matt too. It's like that. So if we're looking at this adaptive reuse, these overlays.
So adaptive residential is not an overlay.
Yeah.
It is
No, I understand that.
Yeah, it's a use allowance, but
It is, but an overlay applied on top of that isn't.
we don't have any overlays right now that could be applied on top of commercial districts that would just limit height. So we have sort of created the contextual overlay tool for 1 and 2 family residential. There are some urban design overlays, but those don't like along Murfreesboro Pike, but those don't typically control height. They are more for design standards like landscaping, but there are already some design standards that are built into this tool in regards to like the aesthetics of the building or where parking is located and entrances and those sorts of things.
So some of those design aesthetics could control height.
Well, they're already built into, no, it doesn't specifically control height. So height is per just the base zoning. So for instance, in CS, the maximum height is 30 feet at the setback line. And then after 30 feet, then you can rise on what is called a height control plane, which means that you can go up a certain distance for every distance that you go back. And so, but there's not a maximum overall height in CS, for instance. This would add a maximum overall height only outside of the USD.
Okay, and then on that, Madam Chair, do you mind if I follow up? Okay, thank you so much. So on that, well, let me pause and I'm gonna ask on the second part of it. With the controlling the, I'm just concerned on the second element on the kind of the mandatory set aside. That if affordable housing projects or developments that are going all residential, how does that set aside, would that prohibit a a qualification for an affordable housing effort. And what I mean by that is, if the Barnes Fund is granting a funding for an affordable housing project, I assume it needs to be all housing. And so I'm just curious about that.
Not necessarily. I have an affordable housing development coming in
That has commercial as well?
that has a first floor commercial added that the developer, LDG Development, added as a part of that development. But I'll let planning speak to that, or if someone is here from affordable housing.
So,
Oh, Angie's
Angie's
here.
here.
Hey.
Oh, sorry, Director Hubbard.
Thank you, Director Hubbard.
Hello, Angie Hubbard, Housing Director, Metro Planning. So the Barnes Fund can do mixed use, mixed income. The developer, when they propose, would tell us how many units or what units. They can also do, the dirt would still, or those units would still be income restricted, but they could do commercial, they could do a civic space. We do encourage actually mixed use with affordable housing because we want those amenities available.
And may I ask another follow-up question?
ahead,
Madam
yes.
Chair, thank you. So all of those uses, have they been all covered by this particular amendment, or are there additional uses that may not be covered by the amendment? The amendment currently states daycare center, general office, grocery store, restaurant, or retail uses.
That would be typically what we would see in a mixed-use development.
Okay.
That would have affordable housing.
All right, thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Benedict, I had you next. Are you still wanting to be recognized?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I got a report of something actually in your district, so something impacting Madison. Let me get my head back on straight. I will update you as soon as we're out of committee. I think, so my concerns on this, I did have concerns about the height. I just think coming out of the gate that it might be something we could do. I guess my question would be, when these rights are given in, commercial zoning, this would be them by right. What is the height limit without this amendment currently?
It would be per the base zoning district, and so there are a whole bunch of zoning districts, and I can pull up the table and go through each one of them if you want me to, but it's gonna vary. But for instance, for CS zoning, the maximum height is 30 feet at the setback line, and then there's a height control plane, which is the 1.5 to 1, I think. So the further back that you set the building, the taller you can go. So if you go back 1.5 feet, you can go up a foot. And so it creates sort of this pyramid of height that's permitted. There's not a maximum. It would be based on sort of the configuration and size of the property. And so generally, yeah, so there's not just a maximum height.
Thank you. And I was,
If there's, so the A districts do set maximum heights. And so that's why it depends on what it's zoned. So,
Got it.
because this bill covers CS, but also CSA, which we don't have a lot of. But those have maximum heights already.
how many parcels was it? I think I remember hearing at the Planning Commission. I was there at the beginning and watched the rest. How many parcels in the GSD are impacted by this bill?
I have a lot of statistics that I was just looking at, but I don't actually have the number within the GSD. I can tell you that there are 5,600 parcels across the entire county that are zoned one of the zoning districts. 4,200 of those are on a collector or arterial, but I don't have the number broken down by USD and GSD.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess the last thing would be on the use. Is it possible for us to restrict these? It's the way that it's written, it says daycare center, general office, grocery store, restaurant, or retail uses. I think that we see people use loopholes, right? And so I'm thinking about what could a loophole be that somebody would want to use Could a pawn shop be counted towards a retail use, for instance? What types of, is, on the land use table, is this specific for this definition in this amendment would be my question. I would just want to make sure we're not inadvertently allowing a use that we're intending not to allow.
So this is in the conditions section for specific uses already, and the uses that are listed there match the uses in the land use table. A pawn shop falls under alternative financial services, which would not be permitted, but it would be up to the zoning administrator to make that determination based on the different use classifications.
Has the zoning administrator weighed in on this amendment?
He has weighed in on the draft. I don't think he's weighed in on, I haven't heard about the last bit unless somebody else, did you hear back from him?
Oh,
Not the
okay.
last bit.
I'd be curious to understand that. I just want to make sure if that's in there, there's no, you know, somebody's going to find a loophole. They always do.
Well, as Mr. Wilkinson has stated, these particular uses, there are already a lot of uses already allowed in the original bill, and maybe Councilmember Horton can speak to that, but these would be specific to the GSD. What kind of allowable uses would be allowed for this particular, for the developments in that area?
Thank you for allowing me all those questions.
Thank you. Oh, I have Councilmember Vo, then Councilmember Horton, then Councilmember Coopin. Councilmember Vo.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just had a question regarding the commercial use. Can you talk about how you got to 50 dwelling units? If we could address that.
Yes, I went back and forth actually because already in the traffic plan, and I'll let the planning table speak to that, but they already have a 75 unit threshold in regard to requiring a traffic plan. In the urban service district or in the general service district, 75 units would be considered a lot. And so the compromise was to come down to 50 units. To include units at all was the compromise. And then instead of just having it required with every development, we added a threshold that would add that requirement so that if someone was coming in and building less than 50 units, they wouldn't be required to keep that 10% for commercial or mixed use. And so adding any units was a compromise, and then coming down to 50 instead of anything higher would really kind of mirror what is it already available in the general service district and continue to allow that commercial opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, because whenever I look at this, I'm just trying to understand because we have a housing, crisis. We know that. And to me, do we have a commercial crisis? I feel like it's more affordability for commercial. So that's why I'm just trying to understand, is this helping us get there or not? So
I think
that was
my
concern.
residents would say we have a commercial crisis in the general service district, in the suburban areas where they have been yearning for commercial for many years, but not having the opportunity to attract the kind of commercial as indicated in the amendment.
Right. I mean, I know what that's like because in District 17, we want a grocery store, we want a daycare center, and we have more density. So for me, I just think that with commercial, you need the density, you need the units. So that's why I would just be hesitant with the commercial use because I want to make sure we're encouraging both. Because I think with more units, we will have more like commercial uses that your residents want.
Yeah, I think this accomplishes both, in my opinion. Councilmember Horton.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate and I agree with the intent of this. I think many of our communities are eager for more commercial amenities, particularly grocery stores. And I think no two districts, I don't think, are the same, but many of us have similar issues. And my district in Charlotte Park and in the Nations, a lot of our residents are really eager to have a grocery store so we don't have to get in our car and drive forever to go to get one. I think we don't want to do anything that would be harmful to that goal. However, I'm concerned that this amendment would be harmful towards that. And I think if this amendment was successful, we would get both less residential and less commercial because of it. One of the best ways that we can get more commercial is providing more rooftops to support that, more customers in close proximity. I think this amendment would be most relevant where commercial is not otherwise economically feasible. And so my initial concern on this was that what would happen is that we have residential propping up a loss-making business that couldn't exist there otherwise, which would make residential more expensive where we're already in a housing affordability crisis. But I think the more likely scenario is the worst case scenario, that this would just cause a developer to set 10% of the parcel aside that would just sit vacant and unused. And that's 10% of the lot that could otherwise be used to house people, which would then encourage more additional commercial amenities right there. So I think to the point on affordable housing, I think it's true that this doesn't legally prohibit affordable housing unit, but I think it does make it much more difficult where we're requiring affordable housing developer to buy 100% of the lot, but they're only allowed to use 90% of it. So that 10% requiring it to sit vacant and unused, I think gets us both less residential and less commercial, and would ultimately be harmful towards these goals I think we both agree on. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to vote against this amendment and ask the rest of the committee to join me in that. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I'll just respond by saying I'm not sure how much GSD you have in the Nations or in East Nashville. I know there's a lot in District 3, and I think from past experience, having worked with affordable housing developers, they recognize the need for commercial amenities to be attractive, particularly when you're talking about affordability and you're talking about having places where people can walk to get groceries or walk to take their child to a daycare or walk to have any other services, whether it's daycare, whether it's hair styling or whatever. We don't have that opportunity in our area, and we would love to have that as you do in the Nations and in East Nashville. So this brings an opportunity so that we're not excluding that opportunity for residents in the GSD. But I appreciate your comments. I think I had Coopin and then Parker. Councilmember Coopin.
Councilmember Poopin here. Sorry, I had to. Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate your leadership on drafting this amendment, and I appreciate the recognition that many of us who are speaking are representing USD districts and not GSD districts, and agree with your assessment of the need for commercial spaces in the GSD and the ability to walk to a daycare, walk to a grocery store. We know that the challenges we face with food deserts and the like. I'm concerned that this amendment doesn't, well, I know very deeply thought out, doesn't achieve that goal necessarily, because if the demand, the bill itself may increase that demand, right? It may increase that residential density, may increase the demand for a supermarket, for example, to come in. I'm concerned that by picking a number like 10% and limiting it, we're kind of boxing ourselves in a little bit. So if a phenomenal project shows up and it's, 9% retail and 91% residential, and that balance is what can be financed. And now we have this bill with this restriction. I worry that we're kind of arbitrarily, restricting that. And then the same thing with height. We've got base zoning that's already in place that's restricting that height. So I'd hate to restrict the height of a potential residential project. And again, I think that gets in the way of your goal potentially, which is, now you're restricting the height, but you're also asking them to make it a certain percentage commercial. So we're really boxing them into a certain space. And they may say, wow, if we had 6 stories, we could have done 1 floor commercial, but now that we're boxed into 4 stories, we can't do that commercial because we got 10% commercial requirement. We just can't do the whole project. So I recognize the concerns. I want to empathize with that. I'm not supportive of the amendment at this time because of those concerns, but I also want to echo that it's an important thing and we should be encouraging commercial development in these areas. And my hope is that this bill does bring more residential density and bring that walkability.
Thank you. Councilmember Parker and then Cortez.
Thank you, Chair. So, I think we've heard from people all over the county, GSD, Urban Core today, that we know there's amenities that our folks want to see in their communities. I think, like Councilmember Vo, the number one thing that folks ask for in my part of town is a grocery store on the Dickerson side. Up until very recently, the Dickerson side of town has been mostly surrounded by single-family, low-density zoning. We've got some, several hundred, a few thousand apartments coming in on Lower Dickerson in the next couple of years, and I'm hoping that increases the viability, and we're able to finally get a grocery store on our side, as well as all the East Bank and everything else that's happening in that area. But like folks have asked me, they've said, can you do an SP for a grocery store and put it on a property? And it's like, that's kind of getting the cart before the horse, like if I can zone it for that, but that doesn't mean that someone's going to make that particular investment until the numbers make sense for them, until they see the rooftops in the area. And I've also just wanted to speak a little bit to my experience with like working with mixed use development, on Dickerson, where we have both policy, zoning, and an MDHA aspect, MDHA redevelopment district aspect that kind of gives us also a lot of people going to BZA on for commercial zoning projects on Dickerson. So we end up talking a lot about uses, and everybody in the community wants to see mixed use in every project. They want to see retail on the ground floor. That can work. But what we often find is that there's some viability issues with trying to get everything in one project. So I think when I first came into office, it was like mixed use everything. We want ground floor retail in every project, et cetera, et cetera. And the viability aspect of that has been kind of challenging to really, really push on that. Like we would push active uses on the ground floor on a big project, and then the developers, they would constantly be coming back and saying like, well, can we put just our leasing office and the gym down there? And it's like, that's not what we're talking about. We wanted a neighborhood corner store. Like we wanted this, that, and the other. We wanted retail. We wanted something that wasn't just for the building people. But it's actually very difficult to get everything in a project. My point with that is that my thinking has moved personally from mixed use projects and trying to get everything happening on one site to having a mix of uses in an area. So it's like maybe the retail's not necessarily getting built on the same development as where my apartment is, but because my apartment building is built, now maybe somebody opens up a cool little shop next door, or a sandwich shop, or a restaurant or something. And that it's challenging. I mean, especially, it's good to hear that our folks with the Barnes Fund are able to work with people who are able to make mixed use affordable housing development work. But I have heard from some affordable housing advocates that, like, specifically projects that are using more traditional, like LIHTC, straight LIHTC deals, would be challenging to involve commercial in those. So it's great that our folks here in Nashville have gotten to the point where with our Barnes funding and whatnot, we can support that kind of development. But that's not the only kind of affordable housing development. It's just a piece of the puzzle here in Nashville. So I am concerned about the impact this might have on viability for some of those traditional financing methods that are maybe less flexible than our locally administered ones, such as the Barnes Fund. So that's a lot of talking. I'm not sure I'll either not vote to make a recommendation on this today, or just because I'm concerned about this viability issue of these projects. If I were to vote one way, I'm afraid I would vote against it today, Chair, but I do appreciate your concern. And I think it's extremely valid, and I don't know what more we can do, but I hope that just rooftops that would be enabled by additional adaptive residential are going to contribute to an overall kind of ecosystem of commercial viability in certain areas and lead to these amenities that we want to see. I know my area is not the same as your area, but that's what we're hoping for on Dickerson, and I just hope it works. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess at this point, we are trying to be intentional and not just hope something works. We're trying to be intentional and strategic so that we aren't excluding opportunities. As to your point, most of the properties north on the northern side of Dickerson Road are residentially zoned, so this wouldn't apply. But on the few commercial properties that we have, for example, there's one near Hunters Lane High School where about 3 acres of the property is commercial on the front, and about 7 acres on the back of the property is residential. So that lends an opportunity with the adaptive residential for a developer to make that entire property residential. And we would lose the opportunity for commercial, a small grocery store, a turnip truck, a daycare, and the other uses that are outlined in the amendment. So this is a plan and intent to be intentional so that we aren't just going on a hope and a prayer, although hope and prayer helps. That our community gets the commercial and retail amenities that so many of your communities have that we just haven't had the luxury to have. So that's the intent of the amendment, and I appreciate your comments. Who was next? Cortez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say I really appreciate the robust conversation from my colleagues today and everybody sharing the nuances of their districts. I really appreciate hearing about your experience and what you've brought to the conversation. So most of my questions have been answered. One did pop up, though. In regard to commercial uses, would STRs be considered a commercial use, or could they be considered a commercial use in this?
I'll let planning speak.
Hi, Councilmember Parker actually has an amendment that addresses short-term rentals that I believe he's going to offer after this amendment.
He smiled when I asked the question, so that makes sense.
Short-term rental properties are their own listing in the zoning code, and so they wouldn't fall under any other of those categories. They are short-term rental properties. So the uses that are listed out, daycare, retail, restaurant, those are specific uses in the land use table of the zoning code. And so they are defined by the zoning code, and short-term rentals are a separate use in the zoning code.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Webb.
So I'm torn on this one because I have a very weird district. Looking at my map, Rivergate would be fine with it. Madison would be fine with it, where my map is, what it's going to hit. But my other side of my area hits where we're speaking of with Jennifer. So Jolton, that little area right there, would not be fine with this. Is there any way that, like, in the historical overlay downtown and stuff, I know there's maps and parcels that are deleted from that. Is there any way that things can be deleted from this? Because, we're trying to lump all these districts together, and the districts are different. What the people want are different. The outlay's different. Can we exempt partials like we have in other things?
Thank you. Planning table, Ms. Mulligan.
Hi, no, it is not possible to exempt parcels from a countywide zoning amendment or text amendment like this. You couldn't say CS properties except for these parcels. For one thing, parcels change configurations quite frequently. And so you could have a parcel that suddenly the next day becomes 4 different parcels if it's subdivided. But no, there is not a method by which you can exclude parcels that are zoned a certain way from a text amendment like this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, with no further discussion, we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Amendment 3 say aye. Any opposed? Okay, if you could raise your hands on the opposed, first ayes. And opposed. All right, motion fails. Thank you. Going on to Amendment 4 by Councilmember Parker. Would you like to move your amendment? Okay, sorry. There you go.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to move the amendment, please. So I'll move Amendment 4.
May I have a second? Thank you.
Thank you. So what this amendment would do is, so right now, these properties that are off of the arterials and collectors are not eligible for residential development, so therefore they're not eligible for short-term rental permits to be issued. And one of the concerns that I had about this legislation and that I heard from other council members was that we would be kind of expanding the short-term rental entitlement in a bunch of places where it didn't exist today, potentially closer into more established neighborhoods off of the arterials and collectors. And so worked with Matt Wilkinson in our office and zoning administrator and planning to draft this amendment. I think all the folks who are going to be in charge of administering this are comfortable with it where it is. You'll notice there's two versions of this in here. I'm going to hopefully move both of them and get a recommendation on both of them because they do the exact same thing, but depending on how the amendment process goes tomorrow night, it just changes the numbering, the section numbering. That's the only difference between Amendment 4 and Amendment 5. So we're on Amendment 4 right now. I'm happy to answer any questions. The planning folks know all about this too if you want to ask them, but I would ask for the committee's support so that we're not expanding the short-term rental entitlement to areas that it does not already exist as we potentially seek to expand the ability to build housing in some of these areas.
Planning table, would you like to expand?
I think Councilmember Parker did a good job of explaining it. I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councilmember Vo.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question for clarification. Does it include if it's no short-term, so it'll be no owner-occupied or non-owner-occupied? I just want to clarify that for everyone.
That's right. It would exclude all short-term rentals, both owner and non-owner occupied, to the areas where residential are being extended.
Councilmember Horton.
I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Parker for bringing this amendment. One of the main purposes of this, in addition to expanding commercial, is to provide more housing options for people. I think it's important that go to owners or long-term rentals and not short-term rental properties. So I'm grateful to him and to Councilmember Toombs, who raised this both at the Planning Commission and at the council floor earlier this month. So I just want to say thank you to each of those council members for raising this issue, and I think it's a genuine improvement to the bill. So thank you to both Councilmember Toombs and Parker for this.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Looks like we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Amendment 4 say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on to Amendment 5. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move Amendment 5.
Have a second? Moved and properly seconded?
Thank you. And brief explanation, this does the exact same thing as the last one. It just is numbered different so that either way that the preceding amendments go, tomorrow we'll have a version of this. I'm only going to move one version of this, whichever one makes sense with the numbering. There is one thing that I want to note for the viewing public. This amendment only impacts the newly entitled areas that would be available for adaptive residential. So we're not going back and changing the rules for folks who have maybe purchased a property that's already entitled for adaptive residential. We can have a discussion about whether that should happen, but that is not what we're doing here. So the existing entitlements under the existing adaptive residential for short-term rental are not being affected by this. So if you're on an arterial or a collector and you can already do it, this won't impact it. That hasn't come up, but I just want to be clear to the public that that's not what we're doing here. And with that, I'll renew my motion to approve.
Any further discussion? Without further discussion, we're ready for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now we're on the bill as amended with 1, 2, 4, and 5. May I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, 2 was withdrawn. Thank you for that clarification. So that, again, is, we're on the bill as amended with 1, 4, and 5. May I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the bill as amended? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? I oppose. All right. Thank you. We are moving on to number 14 on your agenda, BL 2024-346 by Huffman, amends Chapter 1604 and Section 1712-030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws to relocate the front facade orientation requirement for single-family principal structures from the Title 16 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws to Title 17 of Metropolitan Code of Laws. May I have a motion? Moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Huffman is not here. You want to speak on this bill? Okay, I'll sign on it to move it. And so, we'll get an explanation from Ms. Darby. Oh, or from planning, I'm sorry. From planning on the bill.
Hi, Matthew Wilkinson, Council Office, Planning Codes Liaison. The bill essentially just relocates the front orientation for homes from Title 16 to Title 17. I believe the intent of this from the sponsor was to ensure that appeals of this went to the Board of Zoning Appeals rather than to the appeals board that oversees the building code, because it's more like a zoning thing. Orientation is generally found in bulk regulations and not in the building code. So individuals on the Board of Zoning Appeals would be more apt at dealing with considerations for variance from that requirement than the other board.
Any further questions? I do have a question. So in regards to this bill, it changes for family structure, single-family structures, regardless of the zoning number or location in the county. Like if from RS
So
to
it's,
all the way up
so
to
it's not changing any standards at
Okay,
all. It's
okay.
just that the standards right now are in Title 16.
Mhm.
It's just simply moving those standards to Title 17. And so
Okay.
it doesn't actually
So they can
change
mirror the same.
the
Okay.
standards, right? It's
Okay.
just, right now, if there's an issue with Title 16, it's appealed to the Building and Fire Board. And so that's an odd place to appeal a facade standard. And so this is just moving it into zoning. So then if there's an issue, it's appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is the more appropriate body to handle those types of appeals. But the actual standards and requirements are not changing. It's just moving.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, with no further discussion, we are ready to vote on the bill. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Oh. Okay, I skipped number 13. We'll go back to number 13. I thought that was on consent. BL 2024-335, amend sections 1740, 740, and 1740, 770 of the Metropolitan Code of Zoning Regulations to reorganize and amend requirements for the waiver of fees associated with an application to the Board of Zoning Appeals made by a member or members of the Metropolitan Council. May I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on this bill? Councilmember Toombs, would you like to say anything about this bill, BL 2024-335? Oh, that's the one, the requirements for fees associated with the Board of Zoning Appeals, amending the requirement for fees. Councilmember Toombs, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So this just gives council members another tool in the toolbox to assist homeowners. We talk a lot about affordable housing, and part of affordable housing is not just for new housing, but it's allowing current residents to stay in their homes. And for some homeowners who are making improvements to their homes, specifically in my district, there's a husband and wife who are building their primary residence, and they were kind of duped by a contractor. So really they're pinching pennies trying to finish the construction of their primary residence. And so even though the Board of Zoning and Appeals fee is not that high, it is for them. So this is just another tool in the toolbox for council members to be of assistance to constituents.
Thank you. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Councilmember Toombs addressing this. Just one question on, is there a method for determining an income level or just councilmember discretion, or if they ask for it and you think they need it?
Go ahead.
Currently, council members get a certain number of fee waivers for rezone applications, and there's no like criteria. It's to the discretion of the council member.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? All right, with no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right. Schools, moving on to, oh, is that everything? We did the new school. Yeah, we did that. All right, that concludes our agenda for today. Meeting adjourned.